Welcome to Endurance Capital. Today we are talking about something that almost never makes the highlight reel, but quietly decides who stays in the game for 25 years and who disappears after one good season. That is the pack, the support system, the people around you. In triathlon, we talk about watts, pace, heart rate, VO2 max, but if you look closely at the athletes who really last, there's another metric you can't see on the watch. Who's carried them when they can't carry themselves? My first guest knows this personally. Craig Alexander, Crowie, physiotherapist turned professional triathlete, 25-year pro career, 3-time Ironman World Champion, 2-time Ironman 73 World Champion. He didn't come through federations or junior pathways. He built a DIY career from the outside, with a family unit and support group that traveled with him around the world, picked him up after the worst races, and helped him focus on continuous improvement, not just winning. With him is Anna-Luisa Schaffgotsch. Louis is the co-founder and CEO of Imply.org, working at the frontier of women's hormone monitoring, helping women understand their internal rhythms so they can perform better and break less. She's crafting a new vertical in health tech, building a company with a very long time horizon and a lot of stress on the way. Adding the coaching lens, Ian O'Brien, former USA Olympic triathlon coach and now elite coach at IOBC. Someone who sees every day what happens to talented athletes with no support and how different their trajectory is when the right pack is in place. Before we get started, a quick thanks to our sponsor, Stride Health, but more on them later. Today, we are building a support system strategy you can actually use. How to choose the right people, distribute pressure, stay grounded through losses, and sustain elite performance for the long haul. We will be asking several questions. How do support systems, family, coaches, co-founders, teams, sustain elite performance for decades? Or how can founders and athletes build those systems on purpose instead of by accident? I'm Ignacio Garcia, global early stage investor and endurance triathlete, and this is Endurance Capital. Let's get into the conversation. Hello everyone, welcome to episode 6 of Endurance Capital. Let's start with you, Crowie. On paper, your story could have ended as a teenager, cut from a soccer team, told you weren't part of the plan. Instead, you became a physio, found triathlon at university, built your own path outside the federation system, and then stayed at the top of the sport for decades, right? When you look back at those early days, who was in your corner before the wins came?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think when I think back to my early triathlon career as opposed to my soccer career, if you want to call it that, I definitely had more support around me, and mainly it was my wife, who at the time was my girlfriend. And I think, they say, hindsight is 2020. But looking back, just having someone who always offered emotional support as well as great feedback and advice was so important. And perhaps I didn't have that earlier in life as a soccer player. I didn't have the mentors or the role models or that person who, whilst they're always honest with you and give honest feedback, they can lift you up and provide support as well. So definitely in my triathlon career, I think I was very fortunate. I had great mentors and role models, advisors, certainly some coaches who I had something to do with. But the one constant was definitely my wife, Neri. We'd met really the year I started doing triathlons, and she sort of upskilled and leveled up her knowledge in the sport as I did. We were sort of on the journey together. And I think she had a unique perspective because not only could she see, I guess, the logistics around training and the requirements with mindset and discipline and motivation and all those things, I think she also was getting to know me very well. So she always knew um, the things that she could say or the things that I needed to do to sort of, I guess, get back on track if that was what was needed, or just a little bit of encouragement, a helping hand, and to continue, I guess, pushing me in the right direction with my journey. And again, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but looking back, how my soccer career ended, that was probably the thing that was missing, just that ever present, nurturing and supportive voice that, again, wasn't always just telling you what you wanted to hear, but what you needed to hear. And you just knew that, I always knew that Neri only had my best interests at heart. So, and I think certainly surrounding myself with very good people is perhaps the thing I did consistently well, and maybe the thing I did the best throughout my whole triathlon career. And it started at home for me with my wife, and then it was like an onion. There were different layers with training partners, coaches, advisors, mentors, role models, people I could rely on, go to for information, experts in the different performance fields. But yeah, Neri was the one constant throughout really my life and my triathlon career.
Well, I'd love to meet Mary at some point. Would you say partners are a distraction in early career rather than a support?
Well, it's a good question again, and I don't think there's a right or wrong answer or a blanket answer that I can give to that. I know in my situation, um, Neri was never a distraction. She was always supportive. She understood what my dream was, and she knew me very well. So I could always rely on her for good, honest, down to earth feedback, some support and uplifting from an emotional standpoint, which I think is important as well. I don't think any of us are sort of infallible or invincible. You have your down times and your down days, your down weeks. You need that support, and so yeah, that was a constant that was there for me from the beginning, and yeah, very, very grateful for it. And you might say it was good luck, but I kind of feel that we create our own luck with the people that we surround ourselves with. Typically throughout my life and my career, in sport and in business post, I think for me what's worked well is aligning with people who share similar values around.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that, when let's say the team, the group that started doing Ironman, what, 30, 40 years ago, maybe, we're probably not thinking about this. They really thought they were Ironman. And it's in a way, for me, it's a contradiction. Ironman actually need emotional support. Wow. World champions need emotional support.
That's the paradox of life. Life's full of contradictions, and I
Well,
think whatever the
that's why I like
endeavor,
these conversations. That's why I like these conversations, and the audience will
yeah,
be, really interested to know that there is something else behind that champion, and that is a human being, sensible, and that needs support to stay at the top. And that's what I define as the difference between a winner and a champion, right?
yeah, no, I would agree. I think in any pursuit in life, it's a long journey. If you have goals and ambitions of improving and being very good, hopefully world class at something. Again, I don't really differentiate between sport or business or the creative arts. It's a performance mindset. It's a way you think. It's the choices you make every day and why you make them. What shapes those choices? How do you form those habits and behaviors that lead to that consistency and repetition? And again, we can choreograph, and a lot of sports are team sports. In business, we have teams, leadership teams, management teams, teams in different parts of the business. And I think there's a reason for that. People have different strengths and weaknesses. In business, I know they call it reflective competency, finding out what you're not very good at and bringing in that expertise. And for me, it was exactly the same. Even though triathlon was an individual sport, I saw the need very early to do that and create a team around me. So again, there's the contradiction, an individual sport, but I needed a team.
Mm. Louis, you're building Imply in a space that is both technically complex and deeply human. Women's health, hormones, performance. For you, the equivalent of the family unit on tour might look like co-founders, maybe scientific advisors, investors, close relationships. So who is in your pack right now?
Yeah, I think what Craig said was like so true to the situation of a founder as well. You can't do it alone. That's impossible. You need a really good team behind you. We got like really lucky that the team formed very naturally. And kind of onboarded towards the cause. And so we've got a strong kind of leadership team that obviously kind of takes responsibility. So when one person can't do it, every person can take over. And I think that's a really important part, and that needs to always be there, because you have to make yourself independent of the business, because you're not always going to be there, and the business should always be there. And so it's a really important thing to build into the culture that you have. And I think culture is a is a fundamental to when you're building your support system and your team. I also think tribes that are around you are really important. So not only your immediate team, but whoever is in your surrounding team that you surround yourself with. May that be in the same field that you're in, or may that be other people experiencing the same uh, situations as you. These are really important networks that will help you overcome problems much faster, because they have experience, or because they've already failed at something, and they can tell you, don't even go that route. That's not a good one. And then obviously, like, other support systems are family. That is key. I don't think I could have done it without having a supportive family that, allows me to do what I do with having in mind that they will always support me if whatever direction we go into. And I think that's a really important one from your like core human side that you need to bear in mind, because as much as it's about work, it's very holistic. And in entrepreneurship, it's not it's not where you go to work and then you switch off. You have much more responsibilities. And so I think that's really important then to have the support system outside of work that actually lets you do what you do without double questioning this.
Yeah, fully agree. I think the support team, the pack is what keeps you there for 25, 30 years. I mean, can you imagine, Louis, being there for 30 years?
I would
Um,
love to. That's my
yeah,
dream.
that would be nice. Yeah. So I think it's interesting to not to lose that perspective that Crowie is giving us, after 30 years, how important it is to have a support group, somebody to lean on when that investor is not turning up, when that trial is not working, when there is a crash in whatever, no? Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't think you make it through, or you don't build that resilience without it.
Yeah. Crowie, with the hat of a coach, what differences do you see over time between athletes who have strong support systems and those who don't?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think there's always going to be outliers or exceptions to every rule. But generally, particularly in sport and in endurance sport, um, one thing that's very important is just repetition and consistency. It's the way we get fitter and stronger as athletes, repeating the same thing over and again with our skill acquisition, our cardiovascular fitness, providing a stimulus to the body that we adapt to, and then progress that stimulus to further improve the fitness gains. It takes years, decades to develop world-class aerobic endurance. So there's been athletes who have been able to do it on their own, but I think what you see is the athletes who have that sustained excellence over a long period of time just are able to lean on other people in terms of assisting with motivation, with psychology, with all the different elements of performance that go into world-class endurance sports. And I think it's very difficult as a coach to be an expert in all areas. And most world-class coaches are experts in the physiology and the sports science, but that they outsource for expertise when it comes to equipment choices, aerodynamics, and all those other performance elements, nutrition, specific strength and conditioning for endurance athletes. A really top world-class coach would have quite a substantial knowledge across these areas, but they would want expert knowledge in these areas. And particularly, I feel the last 5 or 8 years with the innovations and the technology that's come into our sport, the wearable tech, all the metrics and the data that we're collecting. What does that mean? How do we interpret it in terms of understanding what physiological processes are taking place? How can we use that data really just to get faster as athletes? So, there are certain athletes who I guess are like a lone wolf, but generally speaking, the ones who have that sustainability and that excellence over the years and the decades, and they're the great athletes, they have a great team. And usually what you see is there's a core to that team. It can be family, friends, or a mentor, a good role model. Often they can change their head coach or the experts they work with. I don't think that's unusual. Sometimes those relationships run their course, and sometimes poor performance is the catalyst which drives change within the team. But often you see athletes change some of the support staff or the team around them because they need a different voice, or they need a different set of eyes or a different filter. And so you often see that from the coaching perspective and the coaching lens as well. And I've known many athletes who have just got to the top of the world in their sport, in their discipline with a coach, and then change coaches, while they're at the top, because maybe that's, again, there's so much psychology and mindset that comes into, I think, anything, sport included. It's one thing to improve your physiology and your physical ability across the different pillars that you need, whether it be endurance, strength, speed, efficiency, technique, recovery. But the mind-body connection is strong, and it doesn't work independently. So motivation is important, the science of motivation. What happens when motivation wanes? That's where discipline comes into play. And I think often athletes need to make changes within their team just to, I sort of liken it to an equalizer in a music system. Sometimes you're dialing different things up and down based on what you need right now or this season.
Well, talking about changes, I mean, see what happened between Alcaraz and Ferrero in the last couple of weeks. I don't know if you are familiar, but yeah, Alcaraz at the top of his game, and Ferrero, who coached him for who knows how many years and took him to the top, and now he's got a new coach. And they are talking about Federer, by the way.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because what is it that Alcaraz needs from his coach right now? Maybe it's not the technical advice anymore. Maybe he needs a Federer to give him that perspective of, I need someone who knows what it's like to be an all-time great, because that's what I need, someone who has walked the specific path that I'm walking. Who knows? I'm just thinking out loud here, but it is interesting, isn't it? And one thing I've noticed with the truly great athletes in my sport and in some of the other sports, the athletes I've met, is it's not just about the winning. It's about so much more than that. It's about fulfilling your potential and feeling like you're continuing to make gains and improve the whole time. The great athletes, and I made it a point early in my career to go and train with some of the best in my sport at the time, and still to this day, they're some of the best athletes that the sport of triathlon has ever seen. And often there was a little difference in their training. There was some nuance to what they were doing. Of course there was, but one thing that was overwhelmingly consistent was this idea that they all had, they were happy people, but they were never totally content. They always wanted to improve. Regardless of how many world titles or medals they already had on the mantelpiece, the drive was to get better. So maybe Carlos felt that he'd run his course with that relationship, and he needed a fresh set of eyes or some sort of other stimulus to take him to the next level.
Let's move on. I think the audience, Crowie, will be interested to hear your own setbacks and how you learn from that. Because you've talked about being cut from your soccer team, somebody playing your position, and how that could have easily become your own story. I'm not meant for sport. But instead, you took something very different from it, and you became more resilient and built your whole career based on that. And uh, how many points Federer has missed? How many points also has Magic Johnson might have missed in his early career, but he kept persevering. Can you walk us through your early setback and how that shaped a mindset for 25 years, Craig?
Yeah, well, I played soccer or football growing up. I played from the age of 6 until I was 20. I got to quite a high level. It was my dream to be a professional footballer in Europe. And, I think the early part of the journey was better than expected and as good as could have been expected. I made every team that I tried out for. I ascended to a decent level. But yeah, that incident you talked about, I think I was about 15 or 16 years of age, and I got cut from a team. And it was in the days before social media when, I think now as a younger athlete, you have access to more information about the journey of other athletes. And I'm always interested reading about, the trials and tribulations that athletes, and not only athletes, but in all endeavors and pursuits, entrepreneurs, people in the creative arts, things, that they've gone through that have molded and shaped them to get to where they wanted to go. And, so I didn't have access to social media at the time. I didn't know about Michael Jordan getting cut from his high school basketball team. I didn't know about all these other examples of that. Not only is it, a normal part of your development, it's actually necessary because that's where you learn all the lessons. I just presumed that these great footballers that I saw on the world stage had always been the best player in their team, had always been selected for every team they'd gone for, and that was the journey. And now that was the opposite of what had happened to me, that maybe that life wasn't meant for me. That's what I took out of that situation. And it wasn't until a few years later that I actually found out that I wasn't cut because of performance. But as you mentioned, I played the same position as one of the club directors or the club president's son. So there was some politics involved, as there can be in sport, and which was neither here nor there. No, it's just, but what left a really bad taste in my mouth was how I don't want to say I surrendered, but I just sort of folded up my tents and went home. And that shaped the next 2 or 3 years of my soccer career. That lingering doubt in my ability. Again, I didn't have, I guess, that person in my corner to say, no, this is okay. Let's dust off and get on with it. I just thought that was the end of the journey. And my soccer career sort of petered out. And then I found triathlon at university. So I was a little older to be starting. But again, I never, when I started in triathlon, I was just looking to get into some sort of organized competitive sport again, because it had been part of my life from a young child. I always knew I was going to play sport. I certainly didn't start the sport of triathlon as a 20 or 21-year-old thinking I was going to win world championships. I was looking for a good physical challenge and something that I really enjoyed. And the sport checked those boxes for me. So, yeah. And you know what? When I started in the sport, I think I was a little older. I was a little more mature, still a young man, but you get more insights. And I think the thing that really didn't sit well with me was just how at the first sign of trouble in my soccer career, that was the end. I couldn't dust myself off and really push on. So I just made a simple promise to myself um, to do everything I could to get the most out of myself as a triathlete. Wherever that took me and wherever that would lead, I was excited to find out. I had no idea, but I just felt that I needed to be a little more resilient. And it's interesting, from very early in my triathlon career, the people I decided to train with and the people I chose to spend my time with reinforced that idea, because it was a hard sport. And the more I immersed myself in the sport, the more I came across male and female athletes who talked about the need for that, not only in triathlon, but in all sports. And not only is these sorts of tough obstacles and challenges, not only are they inevitable, they're necessary. It's when you do a lot of your learning. And that definitely proved to be the case throughout my career. Often when things are going well, you know, everybody's really happy, and often the deficiencies in a performance can be overlooked or glossed over. But when you don't win, the spotlight and the microscopes on everybody and everything. So often that's when you do learn. It's one of the cliches, isn't it, that you learn more from losing than you ever do from winning. And I think there's so much truth in that. So yeah, the simple commitment was just be resilient. You're going to get a few bumps and bruises along the way, and in fact, that's part of the fun, and that's part of the journey. And it's inevitable. It's not is there a big storm coming? It's when and how often. And I got to a place where I certainly nobody wants to be going through those challenges, but I was expecting them, and I welcomed them. I didn't shy away from it. I felt that's where I could improve. So yeah, it was completely different experience to what I experienced, and I think a lot of that comes with, again, some maturity. Even though I was still a young man when I started in triathlon, it's just and the people you surround yourself with, their values and what's important to them, and a lot of some of the coaches and role models I had in this sport were some of the best teachers that I've ever had in my life. And just by spending time with them and watching how they operated and their value system, and then it rubbed off on me. So I think there was a lot to be learned by just paying attention and picking the right training partners, the right coaches and advisors, the right people to be around, and just, again, a simple commitment to always get the most out of myself. And that's something that, of course, as I progressed in the sport, the goals, the dreams, and the ambitions got bigger, but that simple commitment and promise never eroded or went away.
There's so much stuff you've spoken about, so wise, so interesting, so deep, and I get a lot of thinking while you were talking, Greg. I see that spirit that you are describing coming back through your life again and again and again until you were fighting to be better than Dave Scott for 6 years, and that spirit came back. Your story could have said, okay, I'm the guy that actually was number 2 to Dave Scott, but no, that spirit came back, and you managed to be better than him and win the World Championships for another 6 years. So it's so wise what you're saying, and also the support group, the people you're surrounded with. We tell our children, we tell our friends, cut your toxic relationships, focus on the people that love you, that you love, that can add value to you, that are meaningful to you, and cut the shit.
There's two interesting points there. One of my favorite sayings is, if you want to get to know somebody, show me their friends. Because I think the people that you spend your time with are the people whose values that you share and who you align with. So I think that's an important element as well. And they're also the people who hold you accountable to the things that you've said you want to do. They're the people who give you the honest truths. So those people are important. And the other point I wanted to make is, I think in sport, and I'm sure it's the same in business, it's the same everywhere. The external comparisons are inevitable. I mean, as a young athlete, it starts when you're in school. You get compared to other athletes. You get ranking at the school athletics and swimming carnivals. You try to make teams. Coaches are pitting your strengths and weaknesses up against other athletes. And, it's an inevitable part of life in a competitive environment that you get compared externally. And it's one thing that we hear as young kids. Our parents always say to us, oh, you just got to do your best. And I think it's great advice, and it comes full circle. Even when you're at the top of your game, or for me as an athlete, I wasn't comparing myself to Dave or Mark or anyone else. It was a self-comparison. It was an internal comparison and dialogue about am I still on this path of continuous improvement? Am I a better athlete than I was yesterday, than I was 6 months ago, than I was 12 months ago? And if not, why not? What are the deficiencies here? So yeah, it's so interesting. We live in a world where the external comparisons are now more prevalent than ever. And especially with social media and this sort of infatuation we have with wanting to see, and there is so much to learn from modeling behavior, for sure, from what the very best have done and how they've done it. There is so much to learn, but in the end, you need to take what you see from all of these people who you hold up as role models or mentors, and then adapt it to your own situation. I think for me that's been a great lesson. And whilst I was always aware of the conversations of how I was held in what regard to other athletes, but ultimately, at some point I knew I was going to be a retired ex-athlete, and what would be important to me would be to know that I'd honored that promise, and I'd checked all the boxes that I could every day, and I'd improved in the areas, I'd sought the help that I needed, and I'd done the things I could do. That, not how many titles, but had I done those things, had I checked those boxes and held myself accountable to my goals and those processes.
This is a quick reminder that you are listening to Endurance Capital with me, Ignacio Garcia. We will be right back after a short word from the partners who help make this series possible. One thing I've learned from athletes, coaches, founders, and everyone is that understanding your own biology is the real unlock. And that is exactly what Stride helps you do. It doesn't matter if you're a world-class athlete or someone just curious about how your body adapts when you train with intention. Stride brings you sessions, your data, and your goals into one place, so you actually see what's working and what isn't. If you're listening Endurance Capital today, you're already interested in doing things differently. So take a look at getstride.com and bring more clarity to how you train and how you operate day to day. Use coupon code TRAMPOLINE and we'll give you £100 off a Stride 1 and 30% off any other individual Stride test or supplements. In startups, the losses show up differently, right? But it's a similar pattern, rejected funding, failed pilots, or product delays, or regulatory friction, right? Sounds familiar. What does losing well look like for you as a founder,
And I think what you mentioned, and that's kind of how I look at it, is very much like the Federer quote of like, you don't have to win every point, you have to win every match. And that's a very different comparison between how you look at something. It's also, how can you be creative about finding other solutions? I think that's really important. And it's finding that creativity inside you. And it's that like a motivation piece that isn't, that means we're not giving up, but we're going to try to find a way out. That is really important, because if you don't have that, things aren't in your control all the time. There are a lot of things that are completely out of your control. And if you're not very flexible and nimble on your feet, you're not going to overcome those obstacles. But you have to, because that's just the journey, right? In a company, you run a journey of like 20 years. If it's successful, these are long journeys. These aren't short journeys at all. And there's an inevitability that something doesn't go the way that you planned it. And so it's about finding a team and a tribe that is resourceful, that can find other opportunities. So, for example, if you've got an investor that pulls out last minute, you can't just say, okay, we're folding up, that's it, like we're going. Like that's not how it works. That happens probably to every founder at some point. Like, you're going to have to go back out there. You're going to have to be vulnerable again and try to find an investor that does align with you. And those are normally the investors that are the good ones. I really liked what Craig was saying, is about like the building towards this also builds your skills, right? Every time you hit a loss, you find skills that you didn't have before in order to unlock what you need in order to get to the next stage. And I think that's really important in order to win the matches, which is like, make sure that you pursue through these smaller setbacks in order to grow towards the thing that you actually need at the end.
Yeah, this brings to mind, the flexibility that you need to have to be able to take the punch when it comes, right? Whether it's a lost race, whether it's a trial failed, whatever. No, that flexibility, um, for you, Crowie, from the outside, it looks like you just had a supportive family and great sponsors, and you ended up, you know, remember as the champion that world uh, six world championships, but you've actually moved as a unit. You chose a specific environments, like you moved to Boulder, you moved to Europe, and you made deliberate decisions and how you wanted your career and your family to run, right? So how much, let's not lose the perspective of the episode, how much of your support system was actually conscious design versus just luck? You were lucky that you met Mary and you were both made to each other, and then everything clicked. Was that like that, or was that or was it instead a conscious design, changing, adapting, kaizen? You talked about continuous improvement.
Look, meeting Neri was lucky because we met on a beach a long time ago. So that part was luck. But again, the people we choose to spend our time with that's a conscious choice. And whether it be your spouse, partner, your business partner, your training partners, your business manager, they're choices that we make. And I think a lot of it, from my personal experience, the longer lasting successful relationships are when there's a synergy between people. Your values align again. You hold the same ideals up as important, and a lot of the minor details you can work around. So I think so long as you're aligned on the core beliefs and the values of life and what you're trying to achieve. But the places we chose to train at, they were conscious choices as well. I wanted to specifically train in the time zones and in the locations and the environments and the conditions that I had to race in, because of the sort of specificity you need in training. And also I think there's a self-awareness piece which is so important. I always knew that if I put my career above my family, I would regret it and I would feel guilty about it. And so I was lucky that Neri bought into this lifestyle and this crazy idea of wanting to be a world-class endurance athlete, and we planned things out, and they were conscious decisions. And then the people we brought into our team were conscious decisions as well. So yeah, I think self-awareness is so important. It was interesting when I would get to, particularly later in my career. I mean, I mentioned before, developing sort of world-class aerobic conditioning can take 5 years or more. And I started as a 21-year-old. So now I'm in my mid to late 20s. I'm in sort of the prime years coming up. You're at that point in your life when maybe your friends and people you've gone to college with are doing certain things in their life. And not that was ever a distraction for me, but I definitely remember getting to Boulder in Colorado to train. And a lot of the other athletes I would train with would say to me, "Oh, can't believe you've brought your wife." And then in subsequent years, the conversation was, "I can't believe you brought your wife and your kids. How are you going to get the recovery between sessions?" And, every decision we make in life has its pros and cons. And I thought the recovery thing, that's easy. I can control that. That's a very manageable thing. What I couldn't control was the sort of the emotional black hole that I would have if I didn't have my wife here and then my kids with me. I didn't want to put what I was doing ahead of them. And I thought I could manage it all. And I was so lucky that I had a wife and a life partner who wanted to join me on the journey. And she was my partner in it. As much as I was the athlete on race day, there were so many things that Neri did in my career. I had the easy job, really, because I got to do what I love to do, which was go out and train. And this process of continuous improvement, fine-tuning my craft, getting better, and then go and race. I'm a competitive person. I love that. But the whole logistics of dealing with my sponsors and the logistics of living in different countries, and everything that goes with that. And there's so much to it. Neri did all of that. She carried a much heavier load than I did. So, but yeah, it was just interesting conversations I'd have with other athletes. And at the start of the season, they'd be like, I can't believe you've brought your family. And then halfway into the season, they were homesick and they were missing, their partners and their kids. And I always, again, it's just self-awareness. I know the kind of person I am and personality. Whatever disadvantages there might be in the logistics or the financial cost of taking the family is just going to be so much outweighed by the emotional uplift and well-being I'm going to have by sharing this thing as a family. And some of our conversations, I mean, my daughter's just been home from college, and I mean, we talk about 15, 16 years ago living in Boulder. She has memories of that. We're sitting around the dinner table on Christmas Day talking about those things. And that was always my hope and dream, that the family would share in what I was doing. And I just feel very lucky. But again, it comes down to conscious choices. I mean, I picked a great life partner, and every decision you make, you never know if it's going to pay off or come up trumps, but you do your due diligence and make the best decision you can with the information you have at the time. And that's all I did. And fortunately, a lot of the bigger decisions, the most important ones, came off. Some with equipment choices and decisions in races. Well, you can look like a genius, or they can end up in, it can turn into a dumpster fire very quickly. But again, they're just learning experiences within the race. The major decisions, I feel like, as a family, we know most of them, and because we gave a lot of thought and consideration to them all.
It's clear from your words, Crowie, that there's no success without a pack, and it may be random. If you don't have a support group, you may be lucky enough to get to the top, but you will not stay at the top for 25 years or so. The same, I think, applies to startups. I see some founders, that go the lonely way, say, I'll do everything, I'll just grind, I'll do everything, and I'll be the hero. But Louis, for you, you're building Imply over a long horizon now. This is biotech, this is high stakes. So you really have to plan for the long term. Otherwise, there's very little chance for luck, right? This is very scientific, very detailed stuff. What are you doing deliberately to design your own pack in the company and outside it, rather than hoping that it may appear?
I don't think anything is really hope, right? Like, as Craig just mentioned, like decision making is really critical to this, right? You don't just wake up and like everything is perfect. It doesn't happen. When you, like, in a short-term plan or a long-term plan, you need to really understand what you want at the end, and you really need to understand who you are in this process, and you really need to understand those parameters to make decisions in those moments, even if they are decisions that are time critical. It doesn't mean that you haven't planned for making that decision for a very long time. Right? So it's like a build up, and sometimes that's, as I just mentioned, knowing who you are, what you want, where you want to go. And sometimes that's making more strategic choices, as in choices that go towards how do I build this trial out with the best people that I need? So you know what you need, you try to find them, you put them together. Some things that we did just took 3 years to build. Like, these weren't fast relationships that we built. These weren't fast situations that we put ourselves into, because you don't just come across them. You have to identify that the opportunities exist, that they are opportunities, and you have to make the right decision in the right moment. And that takes a lot of work in the background to strategically align these, not only from building a team, but building a whole organization around you, right? Biotech is really complex. It's a 10-year horizon kind of thing. It's not a short-term endeavor. And so you need to make sure that you build a team that's much bigger than your actual core team, that can support you, that share the same values and visions. So, and the longer we go into this, the more like I put emphasis on like what are their values. If their values aren't aligned with our values, if they don't understand that we are not a quick commercialization route, then that isn't what is for us, and we're better off finding someone who does. So we're, for example, super lucky to be supported by really great like regulatory support engines that help us master this without, crippling the business. And so these were all found on value support. Like, what are your values? What are our values? How do they align?
Yeah, and those values actually shape your legacy at the end, within your startup and within your career, Crowie. Those values, you said before that your legacy isn't just the race results, right? It's what your kids saw, how you treated people, how you handled losing against Dave, how you showed up every day, right? Even if you weren't in the best state of mind. I think that's huge. And that's what you give back to your support group, to your fans, to your sponsors. That's your legacy, no? So, Crowie, how did that value system influence the decisions you made in your second half of your career? You were more mature. Maybe did that influence your decisions?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's funny, in a lot of interviews I used to get asked, "Oh, what do you think your legacy will be? What do you want it to be?" And I didn't really understand the question, to be honest, until maybe post career. I understood it a lot more, that it's, winning races is amazing, and I guess by definition that is your job as a professional athlete, and that's what you want to do. But for me, my legacy is my family. Yes, my kids, for sure. And I was lucky that they saw a lot of my career and remember it, particularly the oldest two. So, um, and in this world of the internet and social media, it's very easy for them to find out information about my career. And I was always aware of that. I thought, I want to set an example for my kids about performance, and yeah, winning's important, but it's more about the getting the most out of yourself. And it's a very simplified philosophy, but just doing your best. I think it's an important concept.
Yeah. Do you remember, Crowie, that first race when you got to the finish line and Mary was there waiting with your first baby? Where was that?
So, the first few races. Yeah, well, the first few races when I became a dad, I traveled to, the first one actually was up in Japan. It was a World Cup race. And I had a good race. I had a great race, actually. I felt highly motivated. And it's funny. I mean, we have our core motivations, and I talked about just wanting to get the best out of myself as an athlete. But I think as we make our way through life and things change and our situation changes, our motivation can too. So becoming a husband changed me. Becoming a dad certainly did as well. I was extremely motivated. Some people suggested I feel more pressure, that I had more mouths to feed, but no, I felt like I was jet powered. I felt like I had booster rockets on when Lucy was born, and when all our kids were born. And again, my wife is so just amazing. When all of our kids were born, once they were old enough to travel and we got the all clear, we traveled. We went to wherever the training base was. So they were all very young. And yeah, no, that first 2005, Lucy was born, and I had some of my best performances. I just felt almost like a weight had been lifted off me, not that weight had been added to me. And and you often hear people talk about this too. You have someone in your life now who's not judging you based on your performances or anything other than you just showing up to read them a bedtime story and hanging out. So I loved it. It was an escapism for me, away from the professional demands and maybe the pressure that side of my life had. It was so nice to come home from training and just have the family and hang out with the family. So I was highly motivated by becoming a dad, and also by the sacrifices my family made later in my career. And I think this ties into the legacy piece that you were talking about before. I wanted my kids to see that whatever happened, I could see the glass. I could see a silver lining. There was a way forward. Um, Life's not easy, and you work hard. You do your best. You get help, and I've seen those things, and my wife is very much like that too. And I've seen those things rub off on our kids. They've got their own personalities, of course, but yeah, that's true legacy. And I knew my children at some point would be able to look back at interviews that I'd done and find them on YouTube or wherever, and I wanted them to feel proud of their dad. So it was important for me to always just be true. Louis talked about it before. Be true to who you are and what you're trying to do. I think if you do that, you're not going to go too far wrong. If you keep coming back to your core values and your real reasons for doing things, what are your underlying motivations? And I think if you stick to that, you're not going to go too far wrong. So yeah, I wanted to portray that in interviews. I wanted my children to see that. And I feel that is my legacy. I feel that if I've passed on anything to my children, I don't want them to be proud of me because I was lucky enough or good enough to win things. I want them to be proud of me because I was game enough to try something very hard and do my best. So yeah.
Yeah, that connection is so strong with your loved ones that tell me something very personally. Yeah, have you ever dropped a tear in race when you thought you could not continue anymore, but that strong feeling of support from the family and doing it for the family came up, and then you pushed harder, and then you got to finish line?
Yes, oh, absolutely. And I mean, the funny thing about being an athlete is when things are going well and you hear people talking about being in the flow state or in the zone, it's never easy, but it can feel like you're on autopilot and things that you're fluid, your movements are nice and smooth and relaxed and efficient and fast. And I mean, it's never easy to win, but when it's like that, then the job does feel easy. The challenge is when it's hard. I mean, anyone can do well when your ducks are all in a row and the stars align. Who can overcome the challenges? So yeah, in 2012, so I'd won the half Ironman and the Ironman World Championships in 2011, and in 2012 I was trying to defend both titles. And about 10 days or 2 weeks before the first one, the half Ironman World Champs, I hurt my back in the gym. Racing around because I had sponsorship obligations and I had to get 3 or 4 training sessions done before midday and drive down to Denver for a photo shoot. And I wasn't even lifting in the gym, actually. I'm embarrassed to say it, I was actually just trying to move a weight out of the way, but I didn't square up to it, didn't lock out my core, hurt my back. Anyway, I needed to get some medication, but I couldn't take it because it was on the banned list. So I couldn't get the medication that the doctor wanted me to take. And anyway, I went in and did the first of the World Championships and I got a silver medal, which to me was probably a better performance than any of the world titles that I ever won, given what had been going on in the background. And, but 4 more weeks going into the longer race with my back, I just couldn't hold my position on the bike. And anyway, long story short, my brother had flown over to watch the race in Hawaii. My family were all there, and I ended up walking in the marathon. First time I'd ever walked in a race. I was a little embarrassed when it first happened because I was a defending champion. And but then I thought, you know what? I mean, this is just a marathon. I've just got to get through. It'll be over. The sun's going to set on this day and it'll come up tomorrow. And in the press conference after the race, someone said, was it hard to push on when you knew you weren't going to win anymore and defend the title? And actually it wasn't, because it was the least I could do. All the people around me and the sacrifices they'd made. My brother had flown over to watch the race. My wife, and one thing earlier in the year, actually, when we were in Boulder, stuck with me. My wife was homeschooling our eldest, Lucy, and Lucy is like my wife. She's very social. So she likes to be in a classroom. She doesn't like to be homeschooled on her own. And I remember one day I was getting ready to go out for a bike ride. I had a long ride to do. And I'd done a swim session in the morning. And I was in the kitchen, just having some breakfast, getting ready, getting my drink bottles ready to head out on this. It was like a 5 or 6 hour bike ride. And I could hear my daughter in the dining room with her tutor, Lindsay. And Lindsay was saying, "Come on, Lucy, you know the answer to this. We've gone through this yesterday and the day before." And I had a little peek around the corner. And there's Lucy, just trying to slide lower and lower in her chair and almost disappear under the dining table. And, I thought, wow, as much as it's on the outside, it looks like a glamorous lifestyle. We're traveling and we've set up camp in another country, and it was challenging. It was challenging for my wife, things she had to do. It was challenging for my daughter. My daughter didn't like homeschooling. She liked her friends. She missed her friends. And, there was that particular moment and many others. It was never lost on me how much sacrifice the people around me had made so that I could do what I love to do. And even though it was my job and my profession, it was actually my passion above all of that. So, later that year in the race in Hawaii, it was easy for me to push on and finish. So, I felt it was the least I could do.
Interesting. So deep. Thank you for sharing that, Crowie. Louis, for you, when you think about legacy, what do you want your team, your family, or even your future selves say they saw from you while you were building Imply?
I think I always went into this, and this was kind of before kind of immediate family and so on. I always went into this thinking, I just want to like influence, like even if we don't make it, at least I built a platform for others who can then make it. Like we're frontier tech, so the tech that we built hasn't existed. And so it's really important to bear in mind that maybe you're going to make it, maybe not, but at least you build a platform for other people to try after you. And that was really, really important for me, that we kind of strive to push those boundaries to enable also others to come. I think like in terms of family, like Greg, I like totally empathize. Like lots of people give up a lot, and it's really important for me at least, to show them that what I'm doing is worth it, even from their perspective, that they can see that you can push through, that they can see that not everything is always rosy. I'm quite real even when I get home, and I try not to bring back home like work, but that happens sometimes, and you get frustrated. And I think it's really important from a lesson to see and to give back. I also think it's really important to have passions. This has always been my passion my entire life. Biology has been, what we're doing like strongly aligns with that. And I think it's really important to show your kids or the people around you that you can go for your passion and drive through, because it's really important that we have this. And even like in an age that we have today that is like full of AI, even more so than ever, because there's a lot that you can do very quickly with your thoughts, ideas, and wants and needs, because things have become a lot less expensive to run. I also think that there's a point of like the team and how the team can grow with that. I want to be the person that helped the team grow as well. Like it's not only about growth of a founder, it's growth of the entire team, of the entire organization. You are touching so many lives and livelihoods. It's really important to be like a supporting rock in their lives. And arguably the hardest thing about entrepreneurship is like having a team or a company that relies on you, and that relies on decisions that you make. And so it's really important to be there when things don't go rosy, and to make sure that you keep that connection also for their lives going, because they've also put everything into that basket. And so I think that those are legacies that I hope that we can drive forward, that we hope we can build. We obviously hope that we can make it all the way, but that we at least hope that everyone gets the satisfaction of having pushed forward, tried, and given their best to enable the world as it goes on to develop and to build and to grow and to enable.
Yeah, thanks for that, Louis. We're getting closer to the end. Crowie, this one is for you. If a young pro or a founder came to you and said, I want a 20-year career, what is one thing you would tell them to audit this week about the support group? This is the topic of this episode.
The one thing this week, just make sure you got the right people, and don't be scared to encourage self-awareness. Know what you're very good at and understand what you're not good at, and get help in what you're not good at. I think that's the most important thing. Some good advice I got was, what do I need right now? Your needs change as you develop as a person, as you mature as a person, as you grow. I'm sure Louis will say it's the same in business. As things change, the needs change. So I think just keep doing that audit, and what do you need right now? But have good people around you who, I think most importantly, who just maybe share your passion, and I always feel with a good role model or mentor, that trust and respect is important, because often, I don't like the word criticism, but I love the word critique. If you're serious about improving, you need to be critiqued often. You need to understand the areas you need to improve at and not shy away from those, and keep working and polishing the strengths. You need to work across the board on everything, and often having mentors, advisors, business partners, coaches, training partners who, you respect is important, because they can deliver a tough message. And once you're over that initial, maybe your feelings are a little bit hurt, the message will sink in, and hopefully it'll be the stimulus or the catalyst for some change. So just each week and each month and each quarter, understand what are my needs right now? What do I need right now? And who do I need right now?
And don't be afraid of making those decisions. They are intuitive, and you are the best person to judge it. So make those decisions. Yeah. And Louis, for you, what's one habit that, let's say, a founder should start if they want to build a strong pack for a long career for the startup? One habit they should start, and maybe one habit they should stop.
I think one habit they should start is really finding their value alignment. Like, that's really hard. That's not easy to do. It sounds easier than it is. But it's really finding that. I think that's a good habit to constantly go back to, and like constantly put everything back into the frame of, does this align with what I want to build in the way that I want to build it, with the values that I perceive as the ones to drive forward. I think the thing to stop is kind of maybe comparing so much. Like, it's a very long journey. On a very long journey, comparing so much becomes very difficult, because you can't predict the future. So you have to like grind on your own, on your own treadmill, because that's much more important to focus on than to focus on other people's treadmills.
Interesting. I love that. Now we're finishing this episode. It's a quick fire for both of you. Let's start with you, maybe Louis. One moment you were proud you didn't break.
When a investor pulled out, where we had 2 months of runway left, and we made it through.
Okay, and for you, Crowie, one moment you were proud you didn't break.
Every moment, every day had challenges, and yeah, I just committed to the journey and embraced it, actually. So every day I'm proud of.
And Louis, one thing people misunderstand about long-term success.
The resilience it takes to make it through. It looks very easy from the outside. It's excruciating from the inside.
Excruciating. Wow. And Crowie, how about you?
Yeah, it's about repetition and consistency. There are no hacks or shortcuts, although we live in a world that's full of those things. I think certainly at the highest level of sports performance, there's a nuance, and marginal gains are important, but they only come into play when you do the fundamentals. 95% the fundamentals, you do those correctly, and then the marginal gains. You can't just have the icing. You need to bake the cake first. So just commit to the long journey, the long haul.
And Louis, final one. Finish the sentence. This is the one I love most. You stay in the game longer when...
You're happy.
Okay, good. Easy to say, more difficult maybe to implement.
Yeah.
And for you, you stay in the game longer when...
I like Louis' one, happy, but I'll say when you focus on continuous improvement more than winning.
Yeah, and for me, you stay longer in the game when you are surrounded by the people that know you best and share values. Yeah. Okay, so we've come to the end. Thank you so much. We made it. So this is episode 6. Episode 7 is going to be with Alistair. Hopefully in the first half of January. He continues to be a high performance athlete and trying to do challenges here and there. So, Crowie, where can everyone find you if they want to get a hold of you?
They can find me in Sydney, Australia. That's where I live. But I guess if you're talking about online, I have a website, craigalexander.net. I'm on LinkedIn as well, and Instagram and all those other platforms, Crowie Alexander. So, yeah, I'm just scratch the surface. I'm easy to find.
And if they want to take a selfie with you, when is the first race that you're going to be present in 2026?
It'll be in Australia. It'll either be Ironman 70.3 Geelong, the first race of the Ironman Pro Series, or potentially the T100 race up on the Gold Coast.
Okay. And Louis, where can everyone find you and Imply?
So online, we're findable. Implyhealth.com is the website, and find us on LinkedIn. We're quite active there for that, and feel free to reach out via email as well. And in physical, either in Lausanne or in London, and traveling between the US and soon in Tokyo as well.
Yeah, and you'll be at the JP Morgan conference in San Francisco in January, right?
Correct. 12th to 15th.
Okay.
I think January we'll be there.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. No one stays elite alone. Let's face it. What sustains performance over a decade isn't just discipline or talent. It's the people who absorb pressure for you and keep you grounded when things wobble. If you're building for the long term, today's lesson is clear. Choose your path wisely. Thank you, Crowie, for showing us how a world champion thinks. Thank you, Louis and Ian, for joining us today. I'm Ignacio Garcia, and this is Endurance Capital. Stride helps you make sense of your data, see how your body actually adapts, and bring more intention to your life and to your sessions. As a listener, you can use code trampoline for £100 off Stride 1 and 30% off any other individual Stride tests or supplements. If you're exploring what's possible, Stride gives you a clearer map. Visit getstride.com and keep moving with purpose. Endurance Capital is brought to you by Trampoline Venture Partners. Special thanks to our guests, the champions, the founders and coaches who share their stories so openly, and to the growing Endurance Capital community around the world. This series is made possible through production by One Fine Play and the support of our sponsor, Stride Health. If you found this episode useful, you can follow and share Endurance Capital wherever you get your podcasts, and learn more about Trampoline and the Trampoline Zermatt Summit on LinkedIn. The link is in the show description. I'm your host, Ignacio Garcia, and this is Endurance Capital.